Spring Security one-time tokens are a feature introduced in Spring Security 6.4 and Spring Boot 3.4 and provide a way to authenticate the user without additional account setup. In this video, we'll explain how one-time tokens work and how are they implemented in Spring. We'll demonstrate how to use the feature by implementing password reset functionality that will allow users who forgot their password to change it after logging in via temporary magic link that will email them on request. To showcase Spring Security one-time token feature, we'll go to the Spring Initializer site and build a new application by including Spring Security, Spring Web, Timeleaf, and Java Mail Sender dependencies. We'll generate a project and open it in our IDE. We plan to send emails from our application, and I have a complete tutorial on how that's done in case you're not familiar, which you can check out. To be able to send emails in our local environment, we'll spin up MailPit, which is a local SMTP server, which will intercept mails our application sends and display them in a web user interface. In order to do that, we'll create a Docker Compose file at the root of our project and create service for our MailPit local SMTP server. We'll start our Docker Compose MailPit SMTP server by running docker compose up -d. And now we have our SMTP server ready to take and intercept email messages our application sends. To get back to our application, I've created a starting point, so let's go through it. To be able to send emails, I've added 4 Spring Mail properties in our application properties file and created a mail service, which we'll use to send emails. I've also created starting security configuration, where everything is secured by default, and we have one hard-coded user Bob. I've used email for our Bob username, so we can send emails on basis of usernames without additional lookup. I've also created 2 controllers that display 2 pages, index controller to display starting page and user controller to display user profile page. If we start our app and go to localhost 8080, we'll be presented with a login screen where we can log in with our user Bob. We have user profile page and we can log out. Let's get back to our application, and in order to use Spring's one-time token feature, we'll need to modify our security configuration, our security filter chain bean. There's one-time token login part, and for now we'll just leave it with defaults. If we start our application, we'll see our app doesn't start, and it says that illegal state exception, one-time token generation success handler is required to enable one-time token login. Before we continue, let's explain how does one-time token feature work, what does Spring expect from us, and why do we get an error. One-time token login works in 2 major steps. First, user requests a token by submitting their user identity, usually the username, which is in our case an email, and the token is delivered to them, often as magic link via email, SMS, etc. And the second part, user submits the token to the one-time token login endpoint, and if valid, the user gets logged in. So, when our user requests a token, Spring uses one-time token service to generate the token. But it's not possible for Spring Security to reasonably determine the way the token should be delivered to our users. Therefore, a custom one-time token generation success handler must be provided to deliver the token to the user based on our needs. In our case, we'll deliver magic link by email and will display HTML page to the user with the message that link was sent. For the second part, when user clicks link in email, he'll be redirected to the one-time token login endpoint where he'll submit the token, and if valid, the user gets logged in. So, according to the workflow we just went through, we need to go back to our application and implement one-time token generation success handler Spring expects from us. So we'll create a class that implements one-time token generation success handler. It needs to be a component, and we plan to send emails, so we'll inject our mail service. If you go to the Spring Security documentation for one-time token, we'll see that there's a skeleton for one-time token generation success handler that pretty much does what we need it to do. It generates a magic link and then sends it to the user via email. So we'll use this part of the code for our application as well. I've adjusted Spring sample code to fit our needs. Our implementation takes one-time token and constructs a magic link by getting the token value and then uses our mail service to send the token to the user. This whole part is the construction of the magic link, and it will be our app base URL /login/OTT, and then the token value will be the value we got in our handle method. You have to have an ongoing HTTP request to dynamically conclude on which base URL your app is running on. That's why we have this part of the code. Alternative is that you have the base URL of your app as an environment variable. The last part of our method, after we send an email, is to redirect the user to the web page that will display to the user that the email was sent. And this is the web page we need to implement. I've placed it under account OTT sent. Now, if we look at the Spring's implementation of one-time token generation success handler, we'll see that there's a redirect one-time token generation success handler, which is the one we've used to redirect the user to the web page that will display a success message. As a bit of foreshadowing, I've placed this web page under account path, and we'll place all of our public pages for login, account creation, etc. under there. So next we'll need to create the page and modify our security config to make our accounts path public. I made the necessary modifications. First, in our security configuration, account subpath is permitted to all, so it's public. And the account controller contains everything for the account path. For now only one get mapping OTT sent, which displays the web page to the user that the activation link was sent. With those changes in place, we should have everything we need for our application to be able to start again. And it does. Just a slight error on my part, I don't want only the account base path to be public, but all subpaths as well, so /** should be permitted to all. So if we go to the localhost 8025, that's the web user interface for our Mailpid SMTP server. And if we go to the root of our application, we'll have a new form for request a one-time token. If we place our user email there and send a token, we'll be greeted with we have sent you an activation link, please check your email. And we get a new email with our activation link. If we click it, we'll be redirected to the page where the token is automatically filled in a form, which we can use to sign in. And if we check the account, we are successfully signed in. Before we continue customizing our application, I want to go in greater detail on what just happened. User is represented by this rectangle, and the red borders represent services we needed to customize in order for one-time token feature to be able to work properly. First, user uses OTT generate endpoint to request new token generation. This is intercepted by generate one-time token filter, which uses the one-time token service Spring provides in-memory and JDBC implementation to generate the new token for the username. Now the token is passed to our one-time token generation success handler, which we implemented. We use it to generate an OTT link and use the mail service to send the link to the user. And lastly, we display the web page to notify the user the token was sent. This was the first part, token generation part. Once the user clicks the link in the email, we come to the second part, token consumption part. User submits the token to the login OTT endpoint, which is secured endpoint, and goes to the Spring security filter chain. It comes to the one-time token authentication converter, which creates one-time token authentication token that's passed to the authentication providers, and there is a one-time token authentication provider that can check and consume the token. It consumes the token and checks the token by using the same one-time token service. If the token is valid, user is authenticated and logged in. I've started our application in a debug mode and placed breakpoints at key areas of the code, so we'll go through the whole process step by step. At first, we are greeted with the default login page, and there is the default login page generating filter, which is responsible for generating these two forms. There's one-time template for requesting one-time token form, And there is a username and password sign-in form, which is a login form template. Let's try to request one-time token for our user and see what happens. Once the token has been requested, there's a generate one-time token filter that intercepts the request and is able to read username parameter from the request, in our case bob@example.com, and has auto-wired token service. In this case, in-memory one-time token service that's able to generate one-time token from the username. And we see the token has been generated. It has a value, is for username, and has certain expiration date. Since token has successfully been generated, our own success handler method will be called. We see that this part generated a magic link with the token value, and this will be sent to our user via email. User receives the activation link message and receives a new email with the activation link we can click on. Let's click on a link to go to the token submission part. So we are greeted with the token submission form. If we click sign in, there's a one-time token authentication converter which takes in the token from our requests and creates unauthenticated one-time token authentication token. This token will be passed further down the line to the list of our authentication providers, and if there's an authentication provider that can authenticate via this token, user will be authenticated. So let's continue. And Spring does provide default one-time token authentication provider that can authenticate via one-time tokens. We see that the authentication token it received, you see the token value, and we see that it's not authenticated. It also has one-time token service, the same service that generated the token, which can consume and validate the token. So let's go to this part. We see that the token validation was successful, and instead of the consumed token, which was not authenticated, we get the authenticated token, so authenticated is true, which will be returned further down the line to make the user authenticated. And we see our app acknowledges that the user has successfully been authenticated and shows him the secured page. So far we've used Spring Security Form login and one-time token features with defaults. This yielded us default web pages, which is fine for demonstration purposes, but for real apps you'd want your own look and feel. I have an in-depth tutorial on how to customize the login experience in Spring Web Apps, which you can check out if you're interested. For our example, we can use one-time token feature to enable users to reset passwords. And another use case might be to activate the user upon registration. We'll go through password reset implementation together, and a user activation feature will be available in the final example repository. To start us off, because we want to customize the login experience, I've prepared HTML templates for account sign-in form and the forgot password form. If you go back to our application, I've placed sign-in and forgot password HTML templates under account directory. Sign-in form also has a link to forgot password form, which should post to account/password reset with a valid email, and that should send password reset link in an email for which I've also prepared simple HTML template. That takes care of token request part, and when user clicks the link, our idea is to log him in and redirect to user profile page, which has password reset form under user change password, which is displayed only under certain conditions when parameter change password is present. Let's start implementing our changes. First, I'd like to create account email service under accounts package, which will send our account reset password email. It should be a service and a Lombok value, and we'll inject our mail service and Spring templating engine to be able to process our HTML template for reset password. And we'll create a new method to send password reset mail, which will receive an email and password reset link. We have TimeLeaf as a templating engine, so we need to create a new TimeLeaf context in which we'll be able to pass our password reset link. So in the context we'll set variable, which will be our password reset link. And now we can use our templating engine to process our template. Our template is at mail reset password, and we'll pass in the context. And finally, we can use our mail service to try to send HTML mail. We'll send it to the email we've got as a parameter in our method, with the subject reset password for account, and the HTML will be the timely processed HTML. And our mail service can throw an exception, so we'll just for now surround our method with try catch. And that's it for our account email service. Next, let's create an account service, which will have a request password reset method that generates password reset link and sends it via our newly created account email service. So it will also be a service and a value, and we'll inject our account email service. We'll call our method request reset password, and we'll receive an email we'll need to reset password for. We know we need to call our account email service to send password reset link to a given email, and we need to pass in the link itself. We'll create a helper create OTT link method, which will also be for a given email and for certain relative path, in this case account reset password path, and we'll create a method and implement it next. In order to generate the link, we'll need to inject OneTimeToken service, and then we can use the OneTimeToken service to generate new OneTime token. We'll generate it for our given email, and we'll call it OneTimeToken. If we dynamically want to get base URL for our application, we need to have an ongoing HTTP request, which indeed we expect to have. So we can use servlet URI component builder to get the current context path and to build and get URI string. We'll pass in our relative path to the base path, and we'll generate token query param, which we'll get by using OneTimeToken get token value. And before we send the link, it's a good idea to check does the email in this case even exists. And we'll use our user detail service. User exists for the email, and if the user does not exist, we'll just throw new exception. That's it for our account service. We can use it in our account controller to inject it and create a couple of get and post mappings, one for showing sign-in form, one for showing for get password form, and one for requesting password reset. Our sign-in form is available on three paths: account path, account sign-in, or account login path. Default login form is available under /login path, so we'll need to change our security configuration in order to account for that. So let's go to our security configuration and go to the form login part, which instead of using defaults, we'll customize. We need to customize a couple of things. First, login page is our account/login. Our username parameter is no longer username but email, and we can change the default success URL to be /user to display user profile page upon successful login and not the default root page. Our app currently does not start because there's no explicit OneTimeToken service bean, which our account service requires. Spring by default for their OneTimeToken feature uses in-memory OneTimeToken service, which we now need to explicitly define as a bean once we start using it in our own services. Besides in-memory OneTimeToken service, there is also JDBC OneTimeToken service if you want to save your tokens in a database. And lastly, we send the email to the account reset password endpoint, which currently we don't have defined. So we'll go to our accounts controller and define the get mapping for the endpoint, and currently the endpoint will only redirect to the Spring's default login/OTT, which is the page that processes one-time tokens. If we go to the root of our app, we'll see the sign-in form and the forgot password link. If we enter our user email, we'll receive a new email with the account reset password link. And when we click the link, we get a default OTT token processing page. If we sign in, we are signing into our application and our user is logged in. There are things we need to fix and can improve. Firstly, password reset form is not showing up at all right now. And secondly, we want to avoid user click to submit one-time token for validation. In order to fix both issues, we'll implement our own token submission page and replace Spring's default one. If we get back to our application, I've changed three things. First, the reset password link we send in email will not redirect to the login/OTT default page, but instead our own account OTT login page. This is the HTML template I've created. Our own HTML template has token submission part the same way the Spring's default template has, but instead of user submitting the form manually, we run JavaScript function when the document loads and submit the form automatically. If the form submission is successful, we then show the user profile page with a change password parameter. We also want the token submission part to be at account OTT submit, so we need to change our security configuration for one-time token login and change the login processing URL from the default one to the account OTT submit we used in our HTML template. Default login processing URL is at /login/OTT. We can restart our app and try the forget password flow again. We'll request password reset for our user. We'll get a new email. We'll click the link in the email and we saw the message for a quick second and then was redirected back to the user profile page and the change password form is visible. Currently, change password functionality is not implemented in our app, but will be available in a final version of the code, as well as the activate user functionality upon registration. Let's showcase the functionality available in the final app. First, there is the ability to request password resets. When the user clicks the magic link received in an email, he will be redirected to the password change form. And I'll change the password to 1234. If we log out and try to log in with previous password Bob, we'll get an error, and if we log in with new password 1234, we are logged in. Another functionality where we've used Spring one-time token feature is during the account sign up to activate the account. So if we go to our sign up here feature and sign up our new user Bill with password Bill, we'll receive account activation link in email. If we try to log in before we activate the account with Bill, we'll see that our login is unsuccessful because Bill is not active user yet. And if we click the activation link, we see that we have activated our account and we can log in with Bill. So let's try to log out and log in with Bill again. And there we go. And we are logged in. I think these two functionalities were enough to showcase how you can customize Spring's one-time token feature to accommodate your own needs.